Welcome to another episode of Search News You Can Use, or in this case, AI News You Can Use, with me, Dr. Marie Haynes. It's been a while since we did a podcast, but it's time for me to start up again. So much has happened, even just this week in AI, that I don't know how anybody keeps up. In this episode, we're going to talk about Gemini 2.0, which is a huge deal, the beginning of the agentic age of Google. We'll talk about a new advancement in quantum computing that we should all be paying attention to. And as I'm recording this, we're just starting into OpenAI's 12 days of OpenAI. They released Sora, O1, a new Pro plan for ChatGPT, and integrations with Apple Intelligence. So we've got a lot to talk about. If you're new to my podcast, my name is Marie Haynes. The doctor in Dr. Marie Haynes is because I used to be a veterinarian. So what is a veterinarian doing talking to you about AI today? It's kind of a weird career path. Many years ago, I created a veterinary website. I did it because I was tired of my clients coming to me saying, "Oh, I read this advice on the internet," and the advice was really, really bad. And I had to learn how to get that website found. Now, I haven't worked on that website for over 10 years now. It's actually quite embarrassing to look at. But for many years, it was very successful because I learned how to do SEO. In 2012, I was on bed rest during a pregnancy, and at that same time, Google launched the Penguin algorithm, which shook the SEO world. I got so fascinated trying to understand how it works that I never went back to work as a vet again. I had so much demand for consulting with people who wanted to know my thoughts on what Google was doing, so I started an agency in 2017. We had a ton of success in helping sites, but then as more and more AI was used in Google's systems, it became so that SEO wasn't what was making sites do well. Rather, having an amazing business and content that truly is helpful. So that was the thing that really, really mattered. So advising sites became a lot more difficult. And then in 2022, Google released the Helpful Content System, which they told us was a machine learning system. And at the time, I knew very, very little about machine learning. I'll tell you, in 2022, a lot changed for me. I retired my agency, and ever since then, I've been spending almost all of my time learning about the AI systems that underpin search, and also the AI that is changing our world around us. So today, I consider myself, I guess, an informed amateur in terms of AI. I'm not an expert who's gone to school or studied AI, although I've been quoted in The Atlantic and in some other places and on the news talking about AI. This world is just so bizarre. I've worked really, really hard to understand the technology. The other thing that happened in 2022 was that this company I had never heard of, called OpenAI, released a product that we all know today called ChatGPT. And I have been absolutely fascinated with using ChatGPT and lately Gemini as well. If you have not used Gemini recently, I would really, really encourage you to do it. It is getting better and better. I kind of alternate between the two, and sometimes I use X as well, which we'll talk about in a minute. I truly believe that AI is going to radically change the world for good. Now, there's no end of scary stories about AI. I'm not blind to that. I recognize there's all sorts of potential for harm to be done and bad things to be done with AI. My hope is that my podcast and my newsletter as well help you to recognize the good things that AI can do for the world. And I hope I can get you as excited as I am about AI. So what I'm going to do in this week's episode of podcast is I'm going to go through the AI stories that are in this week's newsletter. You can sign up for my newsletter at mariehaynes.com/newsletter. And I've listed all of these stories plus all of the important SEO news in the free version of newsletter, which I think I'm going to change it so it's just email only, not existing on my website. So if you're not a member of newsletter, I'd really encourage you to sign up. And then in the paid version, which is called Marie's Notes, there's a bunch of practical information for improving SEO. Like this week, I discovered that AI is in DevTools, and you can use it to find stuff like referrer info and more. There's There's insight into the changing shopping results. If you're not watching the popular products SERP feature, it's organic. It's something that is radically changing search for e-commerce sites. And there's stuff about tracking AI traffic in GA4, a bunch of other things too. So let's get on to the AI news. Let's start with what I think is the biggest story that we've had in a while. And that's that Google released Gemini 2.0. It was February of 2024 that we had Gemini 1.5. 2.0 is a huge advancement, and I'm full to the brim with things to talk about Gemini 2.0. Demis Hassabis, the co-founder of Google's DeepMind, says that 2025 will be the year of AI agents. And actually, in an interview with the New York Times this week, Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, said that search is going to change profoundly in 2025. I think it's all related to Gemini 2.0. So what makes Gemini 2.0 different? The Gemini 1.5 is the model that we've had up till now. Google's blog post says that the Gemini 2.0 era is all about agents. So let's talk about agents. Agents are AI models that can understand more about the world around you. They can think multiple steps ahead, and they can take actions on your behalf. They don't just understand text, but also the visual world. The thing that I'm most excited about is Gemini in glasses. Now, I know some of you are thinking, oh, well, Google Glass didn't work out so well for Google. That was years ago, before Google had AI in their systems. Sergey Brin said a while back that they were ahead of their time in offering that product. It's going to be much, much more valuable now. I got to demo Project Astra in Google I/O at Google I/O this year. It was such an intuitive experience. Now, this wasn't with glasses. What we used was a phone camera. But I played Pictionary with Gemini. I drew a picture of a cat, and I said, what do you think this is? And Gemini said, oh, that looks like a cat. That's really cute, or something like that. And we just had this conversation back and forth. It was so intuitive. They had these little stuffed animals and props that we could use and ask Gemini what we thought about, like, what are they doing, and that was back in May of 2024, which seems like years ago. So that was a super early prototype of Project Astra. Well, in Google's announcement this week, they showed this guy who was wearing glasses. The glasses contained Project Astra. He was going throughout the streets of London on his bike, and he was asking things like, what is that park over there? And Gemini replied with what the park name is. And the guy asked, can I take my bike in there? And Gemini said, no, actually that park doesn't allow bikes, but you could go over here. And then he asked if there were any grocery stores on his route, and Gemini suggested some. It's kind of hard to grasp how monumental this is, because assuming this works, and I really think it will, we are essentially all going to have an AI agent helping us with anything we want. And we won't have to pick up a phone to use it. We don't have to open up a computer to use it. Like, if I'm cooking and I can never remember, say, what ratio of oatmeal to water I should use, I can just quickly ask my AI agent, how much oatmeal do I need to use here? And oh, by the way, if you haven't used Gemini or ChatGPT or Grok, Twitter X's Grok, for recipes, I'd highly recommend it. I know that drives a stake in the heart of some of you who are listening, because there are some amazing people who make recipe websites. I've really, really found these tools helpful. I've probably made over 100 recipes with AI's help. And you can say things like, oh, actually, I don't have cream. Like, can I use something else for this? Or can I make it more crunchy or more spicy? Or can I use this ingredient? And Gemini will provide a recipe, and it's almost always really, really good. So Gemini 2.0 has new advances in multimodality. What that means is that it can understand images and also audio input much better than the previous versions. Google says on their blog post that Gemini 2.0 brings us closer to Google's vision of a universal assistant. So I know what you're thinking. You're probably like, well, I don't want to be walking around the street talking to myself and getting answers in my glasses. Like, me personally, I don't like using voice search. I'm going to take you and look a little bit into the future here. A little while back, Facebook or Meta talked about something that they're working on, and it's a device that goes on your wrist, just like a watch. Right now, as you're listening to this, put your hands out and imagine that you're typing your name. So I'm M-A-R-I-E. Okay. As you do that, you're sending nerve impulses down the side of your wrist that the device can pick up. And eventually, you can train it so that you don't even have to move your fingers. You just think about what you want to type. And AI will translate that into words. So Meta said, this was a few years ago, they said the time will come where we'll be able to type 5 times faster than we can currently type on our phones. And then there will be some people who get AI implants in their brains. Right now, Neuralink and other companies, Neuralink's not the only one doing it. They're doing some pretty cool things with AI implants to help people who are paralyzed or to help people who have lost their voice due to disease or ALS as an example. And they're going to be able to use AI to decipher their thoughts and allow them to speak, allow them to do things on computers with just their thoughts. But we don't have to have brain implants. We're soon going to have these devices, these wrist devices. And Google hasn't said much, but I did find one patent that talked about a brain-computer interface, and it was a Google patent. So it wasn't all about brain-computer interfaces, but it's coming. So it's not, I want to say too, it's not like these devices all of a sudden give AI access to all of our thoughts. It's something that we turn on. Like just like I decide to pick up my phone and text my husband, instead, I think what will happen is I'll mentally turn on a switch in my brain that says, okay, I want to start sending a text now. So what Google announced with Gemini 2.0 this week is the start of AI agents. And I imagine you'll see all sorts of people talking about how it doesn't work and what mistakes it makes. It will get better and better. That's what AI does. It continues to learn. Gemini 2.0 and things like Project Astra and Project Mariner, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, they all use search natively. Search is baked in to these systems. So I believe that when Sundar Pichai said that search is going to change in profound ways, it's because the idea of typing on a keyboard and seeing a list of blue links in front of us will soon be a thing of the past. Kind of like some people still use the yellow pages in the phone book. It'll just make much more sense to search and to get information with our AI agents. Did you ever think about how Sundar Pichai is the guy who Google uses to pitch AI? And then there's also this woman at Google. I'm not joking here. She's in charge of Google's use of responsible use of AI. And her name is Gen AI. Bizarre. Okay, let's talk about Project Mariner. You may have heard of Claude computer use, or maybe you haven't. Project Mariner seems to be something similar, but I think it's actually going to be much better. I haven't personally used Claude computer use yet. I think Claude is amazing, but I don't pay a lot of attention to it because I don't think it's going to be one of the agents that the world uses. Perhaps I'm wrong on that. I personally use ChatGPT, Gemini, and X. As I think those are the 3 systems that have the potential to be changing the world. If you have not used X, this is Grok is, you've probably used X, but Grok is the AI system on X, on Twitter. It's something that when it first came out, it wasn't that great, but you should be paying attention to it. They actually released a search product a couple weeks ago, which I don't see anybody talking about. And I asked Grok, what index do you use for search? And it said it uses an XAI custom search index. Searching for things on Grok is really interesting because it draws from all of the tweets that it has as well as websites. And so if you're looking for something like recent information, it's quite interesting to use it. And also, X has information coming in from the real world as we get more capabilities to use vision from all of the Teslas that are on the road. Who knows what they're getting from satellites and people using SpaceX, Starlink. And we'll have robots. I saw a tweet from the account for the Optimus robots, the Tesla Optimus robots, and it showed that this week it was learning to walk on rough terrains. And you can see this robot walking down a hill and kind of slipping a bit and then correcting itself. It looks just like a human. And each time it walked down the hill, it got a little bit better and a little bit more stable. When one robot learns in a fleet of robots, every robot learns. So we're going to see some wild things with robots that I think we can't even comprehend. So, okay, Project Mariner. This is an agent that uses a Chrome extension to do things with your browser. So Google has said repeatedly in their blog posts that it's super important that this happens under human supervision. They have all sorts of things about safety and what they're working on because there is potential for misuse here. In the example that they gave, and they said this was a really, really early use case. I think there's so much more that could be done here. What they did was they had a spreadsheet with a list of about 5 or 6 different businesses on it. And then a chat window opens up, and the searcher, she asked Gemini in the browser to memorize the businesses on the sheet and find contact information for each of them. That made me laugh because it reminds me of the early days when I was doing Google manual actions, and we'd try to reach out to every site linking with unnatural links. And I hired people to go and find who is info and look for contact forms to fill out and all that things. So this system would do that for me. I'm glad those days are over. So then you can see Project Mariner is what it did was it opened up Google search in the browser and it did a search for the first business on the list. And then it typed out what it was thinking. It said, I found a link to this website. Clicking it should take me to their homepage where I can find their contact information. And then it says, I'll scroll down and find a contact us link or section. And as I don't see one in the top nav bar, I expect to find contact information in the footer or the About Us section. And eventually it got a list of all of the contact information for those businesses. There's a similar agent as well that Google announced this week called Project Jules, which does similar things for coding, and that's going to integrate with GitHub, apparently. And then, even more exciting is Google's experimenting with agents that can help in the physical world. Gemini 2.0 has spatial reasoning capabilities, which means, so they showed an image just briefly of a robot arm. They said it was autonomous, meaning it's not being controlled by a human. It's thinking for itself. And it was at regular speed because Google's gotten in trouble in the past for speeding up videos and making it look like there's more capability than there is. And this robotic hand was playing Jenga with moving little wooden bricks with an understanding of spatial reasoning. Imagine what happens when we have robots that can reason, that can think about the world, that can understand the world around them. They won't need to be programmed to do a particular task. Like, you won't need to tell it, here's how you empty a dishwasher. It eventually could just look at the dishwasher and reason about how to pick up each dish, whether it's fragile or not. And it could learn where each dish goes because it's seen where things are in your kitchen. I cannot wait for the day that robots do my housework. I think we're a few years away from that yet, though. Then Google announced, along with Gemini 2.0, something called Deep Research. This is also an agentic feature. It's not just ask AI and it puts together all this information it knows on a topic. You ask it something and it creates a multi-step research plan that you have to approve it or you can improve upon it. And then it deeply analyzes relevant information across the web. And it gives you a comprehensive report along with the links where it found that information. So I tested it a few times with searches about different websites and helpful content, and it went and found Google's documentation on helpful content. It found stuff on Search Engine Land and other places, and then it put together a whole document on how this website could improve its helpful content. It wasn't perfect. Again, it will improve. And that document you can then export to a Google Doc. So I think there's a lot. I'm going to be experimenting with that a lot as I do client work this week. If I ever get to it, there's been so much AI stuff that's been going on. So deep research seems really interesting. There was another thing that was announced called TL Draw, which looks really fascinating too. They showed these flow charts where you could write things like an instruction on one of the boxes they had here was man in chicken suit shouting on television. And then there was an arrow to a box that said image. So the system knew to create an image of that text. And then there's an arrow to another box with an instruction that says come up with a witty tweet. And then there's another box where that's the text for that. It's kind of hard to grasp that over voice, over me just explaining it. But I feel like it will become a way to do programming without actually knowing programming. You can say, I want a system that does this, and then, it can, if that happens, then this. And it just goes off and does it, even though I don't know the programming language. It's early days yet for that, though. And then, oh, wow. Okay, so just before recording this episode, I saw that if you go to aistudio.google.com and you click on the stream real time, if you do it on your phone, you can walk around your house and talk to Gemini about what it sees in real time. So this is very similar to Project Astra. I just had a conversation about my plants and what's wrong with them. I showed it a clip of me playing Fortnite, and it got some things right, but it kind of made up a little bit of stuff. And then I showed it my fridge. Now, this is not something new. You could show a picture of your fridge, but I actually went, here's the fridge, here's the door, here's what's in my pantry. And then it suggested this dish that I could make. And I was like, you know what? I don't really want to use tomato sauce. Like, what other sauce could we make? And it said, well, I see you have some cream in there and some cheese. We could make this sauce. And so I was having a conversation with Gemini as my AI agent, which is just wild. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about Google's huge advancement in quantum computing this week. Now, I know very little about quantum computing, so I spent a ton of time with Gemini this week in AI Studio again, because you can use the most recent model of Gemini in AI Studio, which now is Gemini 2.0 Flash. I really wanted to understand what quantum computing is. It's a hard concept to grasp. Now, if you're listening to this and you know quantum computing and I'm saying something that's not right here, please do reach out to me. As long as you're polite. I've had some trolls on social media lately, which is not fun, but also taught me to spend less time on social media, which gave me more time to do podcast. So here's my understanding of quantum computing. In the current type of computing that we do, we work with bits, and they're either 0 or 1. So they're off or they're on. Gemini gave me this analogy in regards to, with quantum computing, they're called qubits. Instead of being off or on, picture it like a light switch with a dimmer. So it could be off or on or somewhere in between. And a qubit can exist in any of those states at any time. You can link qubits together. And what that means is they become entangled. And whatever state one qubit is in, then you can know what state the other one is in. So the example that they commonly use for qubits, for quantum computing, is creating new drugs. So what they do now when they're trying to create new drugs is they do simulations where they say, okay, if we change the molecular structure of the drug in this one way, how does that impact all the other parts of the drug? And then you make changes one at a time to see how each change impacts the rest of the molecules. With quantum computing, it sees all of the possible states and all of the possibilities at the same time in how they interact with each other. So the problem with quantum computing is that when you put multiple qubits together, the more you put together, there's more chance for error. I asked Gemini to explain this a little bit more, and Gemini said, imagine like you're building a house of cards. The bigger it gets, the more likely it is to collapse. So as the number of qubits in a system increases, it becomes exponentially harder to fine-tune all of the necessary control signals. And one error in one qubit will propagate and affect all of the others. So this new chip that Google made is called Willow. It uses something called surface codes that involve putting the qubits in a lattice. And the way that they did it, the more qubits there are, you actually reduce the chances of errors. So this means that they can do way more computation. And this has been a challenge reducing errors that quantum computing has struggled with for 30 years now. So Google says they did some computation. Now, I'm not sure exactly what it was, but the computer took 5 minutes to do it. And they said if we tried to do that computation on a classical computer, even today's fastest supercomputer, it would take 10 septillion years. That's 10 to the power of 25, which is a number bigger than the age of the universe. Kind of hard to grasp. So at this point, there aren't actually any practical applications of quantum computing being used, as far as I know. But what this means is that most likely quantum computing is possible. And I think it has big implications for AI. The biggest limitation of AI is computational power. So as Google figures out quantum computing, they'll be able to do exponentially more with AI. We're headed to like a wild future where a lot of things are going to become possible. Let's talk a little bit about OpenAI. This week, they're doing something called the 12 Days of OpenAI. And as I'm recording this, we've just had 5 of these days already. It feels like it's been a couple of months of these announcements. On day 1, they announced O1 and Pro mode. Now, if you're a paid user of ChatGPT, you may have used O1 Preview. This is the reasoning model, the model that thinks for a while before it provides you with an answer. That was the preview of O1, which is now out. I used O1 a few times. If you're a Plus user, you pay like the one who you pay $20 a month for ChatGPT. You get, I think it's 50 uses per week. So I'm a little bit selective on what I do with it right now, and I'm still kind of learning on what types of prompts I should be giving it. But actually, it's really good. I want to give you something that you can try here. I think this is a really fun thing that I like to do. You can, if you're trying to figure out a problem in your life, ramble on about the problem. What I do is I turn on my recorder on my Pixel phone, but you could write about it in a Google Doc or you could record it somewhere else. And then give that conversation to O1 and have a conversation with O1 about your conversation. Say, I'm brainstorming on this issue. I want you to tell me the pros and cons. I want you to help me come up with new ideas and things I could try. Help me understand where the pitfalls are, what the problems are. Then, once you're finished talking with O1, take that conversation and copy and paste it into Notebook LM. Notebook LM is Google's product. It's free to use. And it can do some really cool things. I use Notebook LM with, I put things like the entirety of the Pandu Nayak testimony from the DOJ versus Google trial, along with the Douglas Ord testimony and a few other notes on how Google's algorithms work. And then I can ask, like, where did they talk about rank brain? Where did they talk about click signals? And it will give you exact quotes. It's not something that makes stuff up with AI. But the most popular feature of Notebook LM is that it will make a podcast for you. You can give it instructions. And so I'll say something like, here's a conversation I had with ChatGPT. I'd like you to expand on this conversation. Give me more ideas. Tell me where the pitfalls are. And most of all, inspire me to help me figure out what to do. And I'll say in the instructions, you're speaking to me, Marie. And it's really cool. But sometimes it switches. And instead of speaking to me, the second podcast host becomes me, and that's kind of weird. But I would encourage you to give that a try. It's actually kind of cool to help process through a bunch of thoughts that you have. So on that first day, OpenAI also announced a new mode for ChatGPT called ChatGPT Pro mode. This is $200 a month. You get unlimited access for all of the models, and you get a slightly better O1 model than is currently available to everyone else. And also you get unlimited access to Sora, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. I personally am not going to be paying $200 a month for this, but I think some of the heavy users of ChatGPT might find it useful. And who knows, I may change my mind on that in the future. Next, they pre-announced something called reinforcement fine-tuning. It's not yet available. I'm not going to go into great detail, but reinforcement fine-tuning is how ChatGPT improved, and likely Gemini as well. What you do is you give it a bunch of examples, like here's the question, here's the answer, and then you give it a bunch of training examples where the model doesn't see the answer that you've provided. And then it figures out like how close was it to the actual answer, and it does things to make it more likely that it goes down the thought process line that ended up in good answers and disincentivize the line of thinking that was incorrect. And over time, as you fine tune your model, you can get it way closer to the output that you want it to produce. So this will help improve the accuracy of models. They're using it right now in research for genetic diseases and trying to predict, like, okay, we have all these symptoms, which gene is more likely to be causing these problems, and it looks like a pretty cool thing. The next thing that OpenAI released, which I'm sure you've heard of, is Sora. Sora is text to video. Now, just last week, Google released, although it's just in developer mode, something called Willow, which is also text to video. I haven't played with that yet. Sora is available to anybody with a ChatGPT Plus account, so the $20 a month account. I made a couple of things with it. It is kind of cool. I gave it a picture of my cat and it animated it, and it was actually pretty good. Like, my family believed that it really was my cat. And then I asked for a picture of a panda and a penguin sitting and enjoying or previewing what the future would look like. And it had a hard time with that. It gave me two pandas, one of which had penguin feet, and it didn't exactly make something great. So that could be a prompting issue, though, not a Sora issue. It's in early stages. But if you have a ChatGPT Plus account, I'd encourage you to use it. And I would encourage you also to watch the video for OpenAI's announcement on day 3 of their 12 days of OpenAI, because they really went into a lot of depth on how to use it. There's a storyboard. You can have multiple scenes. You can blend scenes together so they're cohesive. And I think right now you can only make like 5 to 15 seconds of video. But as it improves and as the capabilities of AI improve, I don't think we're far from the day where we can create a whole movie based on ideas that are in our head. And it'll be quite entertaining. On day 4, OpenAI announced Canvas, which again is a little hard to grasp, especially over a voice podcast. I think this will be especially helpful if you're a coder. So you can actually now run Python code from within ChatGPT and see the output of that code. And if there's an error, it's kind of like you have an assistant that's sitting with you. It helps figure out the error. It recompiles the code and runs it again. And you can do this in Canvas. They also showed Canvas as a document. It's kind of like ChatGPT was your assistant editing it with you. And you can make changes and you can say, where should I add references in here? And it will highlight things for you. And you work collaboratively with your assistant. The other thing that I think is amazing, although I haven't quite grasped how we're going to use it yet, is you can use Canvas within a GPT. If you have not yet made a custom GPT, it's something that I really recommend doing. I just made one this afternoon for my daughter to help her study for her biology homework, and it makes a quiz. And then I asked with the instructions, if she can't get the answer, give her something to help her remember what the answer is. And so GPTs are very, very interesting and helpful, I think. Well, there were a bunch of other stories that I've covered in newsletter. This week of Marie's Notes, which is my paid version of newsletter, has almost 60 pages with all of the stuff we've talked about here. Also, OpenAI made a deal with Future to bring content from Tom's Guide, from PC Gamer, from Tech Radar, Marie Claire, and other publications into ChatGPT. Meta is building a $10 billion AI center in Louisiana. There's a study that shows that 2/3 of all legal teams think they should be using AI in their jobs. I think AI is going to radically change the legal profession. And then there's also a super interesting story about a church in Switzerland that created a chatbot with ChatGPT 4.0 that is a GPT 4.0 powered version of Jesus. Apparently, 2/3 of the 1,000 people who had conversations with this chatbot, they said it was a confession, although you're not supposed to be telling personal information, so I don't know what's happening there. But 2/3 of the people who had a conversation with this chatbot said that they came out of the confessional with a profound spiritual experience. I'm sure a lot of people have thoughts on that. I thought it was a pretty interesting story. If you are an SEO, there are a ridiculous number of things that I've written about this week to help you with your job, especially in e-commerce. The popular products SERP feature is really stealing traffic and pushing down organic results for many sites. And there's very little that talks about how to get in there. I have a bunch of ideas as I'm analyzing this for a client of mine. The November core update finished, and I've got a whole bunch of stuff, including how Ahrefs and SEMrush don't seem to be lining up as usual. Usually we can see the drops and the increases, even though the numbers aren't right. Usually the trends line up, and they're not. So I have some ideas on that. And then a bunch of stuff on Google's site reputation abuse manual actions, which is something that really has shaken up the world. It's wild that they did this right before the holiday shopping season. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I thoroughly love doing podcasts. I've been traveling lately and ran into several people who asked, why did you stop? And it's because I'm just trying to do too many things, but I'm honing down into what I need to do. And I know that that's talking about AI. I've got some changes coming up to the search bar, my community. It's a good time to join because I'm going to be introducing some new things, and those who are currently registered as paid users are going to have upgrades, automatic upgrades to the new things. I'll keep you in suspense on what those are. And I'm going to be trying to do podcasts on a regular basis so that I can help you stay up to date with what's happening in AI. There is so much going on. I hope you're as excited for the future as I am, and I wish you the best of luck with everything.